Okay, we are on Pasuk Perek Chaf Aleph, Pasuk Tes Zayin is where we got to. So we're talking about cursing the parents, and if you start learning this, by the way, if you learn the parsha over here, you're going to get a lot of Baba Kama here. There are going to be a lot of Baba Kama laws. Now we're on page 420. If you're up, before you stand up for a second, while you're up, could you breathe? There's a Gemara Kedushin on the shelf over there. You got Kedushin. Where? Oh no, the Gemara's are right here. I got it. You work.
Page around 420.
Yeah, 420. Okay. So. V'chiyarivun anoshim. Two people have a fight. V'hika Esrael be'evan of egrof. He hit him with a stone or with a fist. V'lo yafbus v'nofal amishkav. Page 420. Guy didn't die. He fell into his sick bed. How does the arts go translate it? He fell into bed. Im Yaakov misalech b'chutz al mishanto. If he gets up and he walks outside on his stick, v'nika hamakeh, the one who hit him is absolved. Rak shivto yitain, he must pay for his compensation. V'rapo yirape, and he must pay for the medical bills. Now, the Chazal say over here, you have a very big question. A guy goes and a guy gets sick, or a guy gets injured. So what do? You go to a doctor. So the company says, well, I understand. Hashem brought an illness on somebody. Isn't it a chutz if Hashem brought the illness? The guy brought the illness, so what right have you got trying to get rid of it? Hashem obviously brought the illness. So the Torah has to give, the Torah comes along and the Torah says, Virapo yirape. These two words, Virapo yirape teaches, Mikan, from here we see that a doctor has permission to heal. Mikan shenitan rishus l'rofe l'rapos. A doctor has permission to heal. That's what the Gemara says. Okay. Now, that's what Chazal darshan. Chazal darshan that a doctor has permission to heal. That means you need special permission from the Torah for a doctor to get involved. And once the Torah says that, a person who gets sick has an obligation to go to get medical treatment. And not only you have to get medical treatment, you have to go to the best doctor available. You have to get to the best doctor that you could possibly go to. It's all hashgacha. It's all bashert and everything else. But the way they put it, a doctor has a malach. He's got an angel working with him. He's got a malach helping to cure the people. But somebody once said, one of the gedolim once said, a little doctor has little malachim and a big doctor has big malachim, right? And so you need the best doctor. I once heard about a woman who was being taken into life-threatening surgery. Went to dangerous surgery. So she looked up at the doctor and she said to the doctor, I just want you to know that if anything goes wrong, I don't blame you. The doctor said, thank you very much. I appreciate that. She said, but I also want you to know if anything goes right, I don't credit you either. Right? Because you're only an agent of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. How to like that? And that takes guts. That takes guts. At the line of scrimmage, that takes guts, right? But that is the attitude. The attitude is that the doctor is an agent of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, but once the Torah says V'rapo yirape, then there is a concept of your responsibility to go to the doctor. Now, there is an idea of when to go. Say a person has moderate pain. I don't know, they got to go running to the doctor right now. Your davening has greater potential of changing what's really happening when it's not blatantly obvious. So, for example, a woman is pregnant. Let's say a woman's pregnant. The baby has a problem. You don't know that the baby has a problem in the womb. The baby has a problem in the womb. When you daven, a father, man, husband davens, up to 40 days from conception, you could daven for a boy. Because the gender is determined after 40 days. So up to 40 days, you could daven for a boy. And if you want a girl, you could daven for a girl, But the Gemara just says it in terms of davening for a boy, because generally that's the standard. But if you should daven that it should be a healthy baby, and you should daven that it should be an easy birth. Now, if a woman goes for what kind of tests? They do routine tests at various points during the pregnancy. She goes to the test, and with an ultrasound or whatever they do, they determine the baby's got a problem. Then you can't just daven that the baby should be healthy until you know anything and you have nothing to suspect. Daven for a healthy baby. And it could be that will be the difference between the baby being healthy and not healthy. Once it's determined based on medical, they see the problem. So then it would require a nes golui, a revealed miracle, to change the circumstances. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do so easily. A revealed miracle it doesn't do. There have been plenty of cases of diagnosis of misdiagnoses. There are plenty of cases where they say, the baby's got a problem, and the baby's going to have a hole in the heart, or the baby's got a problem with his brain or whatever. And then the baby's born 100% normal. There have been misdiagnoses like that. But once it's determined, it becomes more difficult to switch it. On the other hand, you have a responsibility. Every one person who is not feeling well has a responsibility to go to a professional doctor. You have to go to a professional doctor. That is your hishtadlus. Once the Torah says, v'rapo yirape, that the doctor has permission. Now, interestingly, the Gemara in Kedushin, and Daf Pei Beis, mentions various professions. And the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, Hachamorin, donkey drivers, Ruvan Rishoim. Most of them are wicked because of certain, they tend to graze in the wrong places and they steal. Hagamol and Ruban Ksherin, most camel drivers are kosher because they're out in the deserts and in dangerous places, so they do a lot of davening. Hasaponim, sailors, merchants, Ruban Chasidim, they're really pious. Because when you're out on the high seas in the old days, as soon as it started, the ship started shaking, you daven like crazy. Okay? In our day and age, the only thing I can think of is when you're on an airplane and you hit some heavy turbulence. Right? If you're ever on a plane, you see turbulence or heavy turbulence on the way. If there are any Beis Yaakov girls on the plane, I guarantee you're going to see those Tehillims come out. And also the Beis Yaakov, they're all davening, chuckling away, which is a good thing. It's always a good thing to say Tehillim. Right? Then it says like this, Tov shiberofim legehenim. The best of doctors goes to Gehenim. That's what it says. Mishnah and Kedushin and Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph. Now what does that mean? The best of doctors goes to Gehenim. So somebody once said tongue-in-cheek, because of the Gehenim, they need good doctors. Right? But that's not the plain meaning. Rashi, and this is where, remember we were speaking yesterday about how Rashi's genius is in his brevity. There's a Rashi over here, he gives 5 reasons. In one Rashi this long, he gives 5 reasons. Why does it say Tov Sheberofim LeGehenim? So Rashi says, number 1, Eino Yoreh Be'acholi. He's not afraid of being ill. Doctor's not afraid of illness. He figures he knows what the illnesses are. He could cure himself. He's not nervous. He's got all the drugs available to him. I've always been jealous of doctors. A doctor gets to prescribe himself. Yeah, I'll have some antibiotics. Maybe toss in a little codeine while I'm at it. He's got it and he can write his own prescription. Umacholo maicho briim. He eats good food. He's not worried. He eats healthy food because he's got money. Ve'eno mishaber libo lamoko. He's not contrite in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because, it's very difficult when you're a doctor to not take credit for what you're doing. I'll tell you something else. I'll add something else in a second. Upe'amim shehoreg nefasho. Sometimes he kills people. Sometimes the doctor kills people. Maybe one mistake, and you could he gave the wrong medicine or wrong diagnosis. People are dead. V'yesh biyado l'rapo sa'ani ve'eno merape. And sometimes their poor man comes to him. He's not going to cure the guy because he's got he charges a lot. So you have a doctor could actually. There was a case I get to. There was a case here in Israel. The chief cardiologist at Ichalov Hospital. The Ichalov is in Tel Aviv or Petach Tikva, I forgot where it is. The chief cardiologist at Ichalov Hospital, he was in the middle of doing a surgery. He was doing a surgery, and his telephone, on a woman, his telephone rang, and he answers the phone, and he says to the what's the guy called? The student, what's the student? The resident. Oh, the resident and the anesthesiologist says, okay, there's nothing more I can do. Close her up. There's nothing, we can't do anything here. Close her up. And he walked out of the room. And the resident looked at the guy and said, I think there's something we could do. And they worked on her. And they managed to keep her alive for, I think it was another 11 days. What happened? He got a call. He was in the middle of doing a surgery, which was from the socialized medicine. He got a call from a private patient. Then it turned out, they did an investigation on this guy, and they found out that he's been taking bribes over the years to give people precedence in treatment and his private patients. Because in Israel you get both. The doctors work part-time on the socialized medicine, part-time you get in privately. Sometimes you can't get an appointment here for 2 months to see a specialist, but if you pay privately, you go the next day. So the guy, they sentenced him to 7 years, and they what's it called when the guy is stripped of his, what do you call it? They gave him 7 years in prison. I mean, I would have taken this guy and hung him in a public square. This guy's a chief cardiologist. We're not talking about a podiatrist over here who's pulling splinters out of people's toes. We're talking about a chief cardiologist over here. A chief cardiologist who's got people's life in hand. So you see, because sometimes doctors could literally kill people. So one of the problems, Moshe, what were you going to ask? Go ahead.
Is there a problem with a Kohen being a surgeon?
There is a problem it's an excellent question. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva that was written before he died. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, he had a tshuva that he said a Kohen cannot become a doctor because doctors have to work on cadavers. That appears in the Igros Moshe and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. I had a student here at Or Sameach who came in, and this guy was Shomer Shabbos already. He said to me, Rabbi, I'm a Kohen and I want to go to medical school. What should I do? So I said to him, look, to the best of my knowledge, it's problematic. You have to speak to halachic authority, but to the best of my knowledge, it's problematic. So he said to me, Rabbi, I'm going to medical school. Now what should I do? Okay, it's pork, but I'm going to eat it anyway. Now, what should I do? I should make a bracha or not make a bracha. So I sent him to a posek, and the posek himself happened to be a Kohen, but I took him to a big posek, and he said to him, I can't. There are no dispensations in Yiddishkeit. I can't give you. There are no dispensations, but if you're going to do the best, at least don't come into physical contact with the cadavers. That was what do you call it? And in general, by the way, you should know that in halacha, we don't give in to threats or blackmail. If a guy comes to posek and says, if you don't allow me to do this, then I'm going to take off my yarmulke completely, and I'm going to be completely. That's up to you. Halacha isn't going to change because of your threats. And if you do it, you're only going to hurt yourself. You're not hurting anybody else. We don't take threats. If you don't allow me to remarry, if you don't allow me to give my wife a get to force her, then I'm going to be completely non-religious. I'm going to make my kids non-religious too. That's up to you. That's up to you. We're not changing the halacha for you. That's why, in general, we don't give them the blackmail. So the guy says, well, I'm going anyway. All right, you're going anyway. But Cedar, I'll give you a one-way ticket to Kohanim too. I can't. There's nothing I can do about that. Just have a good ride. Maybe go first class because you'll be down there for a while. So I can't. Then years later, I had another guy in a different yeshiva who came to me. This guy was a Kohen. He wanted to become a cosmetic surgeon. And at that point, he was told his father-in-law went to Reb Dovid Feinstein. Reb Moshe Feinstein was no longer alive, and he went to Reb Dovid Feinstein, who was the biggest posek in America, Reb Moshe's son, and he told him that the facts on the ground had changed in the medical schools. They were no longer required to work on cadavers. At one point, there was even a shortage of cadavers in America, I guess because Giuliani had put down the crime in New York. There was a shortage of cadavers in America, and it was no longer mandatory to work on cadavers. And Dovid Feinstein, according to his father-in-law, Dovid Feinstein said it was mutter. So I only know by word of mouth. And this guy he became a cosmetic surgeon. So there are problems. There are problems for Kohanim. Certainly still problems. I don't know that it's forbidden. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein has a document that it's forbidden. And it could be that, again, that if the facts change, and Dovid Feinstein said they changed, so the facts have changed. So this is where the doctor is facing a tremendous challenge. Because the doctor is somebody who all day long has total expertise over everybody who's coming in to speak to him. It's one person after another who's coming into the doctor. The doctor is what do you call it? The doctor is the final word in the expert. The person, most people coming in are absolutely clueless especially if it's a baby. A mother's bringing a baby, or guy's coming in. To this day, I don't know how antibiotics work exactly. And the doctor is telling me, I do what the doctor says. And then he's got people saying thank you all day. Every day I really, oh, thank you very much. Thank you to the doctor. So it really takes, a doctor has to have a lot of your Baruch Hashem. In our neighborhood, we have a doctor, a tzaddik, Dr. Leibovich is in our neighborhood in Neve Yaakov. He has a sign in his office with the prayer that the doctor says, and he's a humble guy. He sits and learns every free minute, and he's but it's a hard thing. It's a very hard thing for a doctor. People worship a doctor. People look at the doctor. Not only they worship the doctor, it is very common in the secular world that when somebody has a question on morals and ethics, they ask doctors. Because, he's educated, he's a doctor, maybe the doctor knows. Is it right to do this or that? Maybe because it's a doctor. Whereas sometimes you can find doctors who are extremely unethical. And I had a guy here in the yeshiva who told me his father was a doctor, was a surgeon, had golden hands. He would do surgery, came home every single night, sat down in front of the TV, knocked off an entire bottle of scotch in front of the TV. Went to sleep. I said to him, how did he function? He says, it was up next morning, 6 o'clock, fresh as a daisy, right? Went into surgery, right? So it's a very, very, they said he had golden hands. He told me he had golden hands. He was a very high-level surgeon. There are pilots, by the way, who sometimes are, yes, Jake, be aware of this. They actually had a case where two guys from flying for British Airways were arrested in Holland. I think they were in Holland. They're supposed to fly from Holland to England. They were walking out of a tavern right into the cockpit, right? And they were way over the alcohol limit. Yeah. So they had a guy. The Russian Airlines. I don't know if you had a Russian Airlines, which I would never fly on. They had one Russian plane flying into Israel that got within 300 yards of the main Tel Aviv-Yerushalayim highway because he thought that was the runway. Right, so to go 300 yards is not that far, and he got within 300 yards of the main Tel Aviv-Yerushalayim highway because he thought it was a runway. Now, I don't know what went wrong over there. The chances that they were nipping at the vodka in the cockpit is not unlikely, and you don't know what's going on. Oh, well, that looks like a good runway, right, Ivan? Yeah, Igor. Let's take it down. Let's just take it down on that bus over there. Here we go. So you're talking about a very dangerous profession. It's a dangerous profession. It's a guy who could do it is doing chesed all day. My doctor is I'll be tremendous about chesed. He's doing tremendous chesed. But it's a dangerous profession. On the other hand, once it is there, then you have an obligation to do your medical hishtadlus. A person can't say, well, I trust God. I don't have to worry about it, and I'll trust God and I'll daven. That's a responsibility once the Torah says that the doctor has the right to cure you. Okay? Now, let's go on. Take a look at Pasuk Lamed. First of all, 422. 422. So the Torah says like this. Top of the page. V'chi notzo anashim, people are fighting. V'nagvu isha hara, they hit a pregnant woman. V'yatzu yeladeh v'lo yason. They cause a miscarriage, but she doesn't die. Anosh yanesh kasher yashish olav bala isha v'nasan biflilin. The guy has to pay a fine. He has to pay a fine they make an assessment, and they pay a fine. V'im asoniya, and if there's a death, v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh. Now, what about an injury? Says the Torah, and this is one of the most famous lines in Torah that's quoted in the non-Jewish world as well. Ayin tachas ayin. What does ayin tachas ayin mean?
Eye for eye.
An eye for an eye. Shein tachas shein, a tooth for a tooth. Yod tachas yod, regel tachas regel. A foot for a hand, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, it goes on, a wound for a wound, and so on. Now, first of all, we have a tradition. What does it sound like the Torah is saying? Ayin tachas ayin.
Punches you, you punch them back.
If somebody knocks out your eye, so you knocks out somebody's eye, you knock out his eye. An eye for an eye, right? An eye for an eye, which was taken, the Italian mafia certainly learned this parsha, right? They certainly learned this literally. We have an oral Torah. The oral Torah says ayin tachas ayin is kesef. You pay money, financial compensation. Now the Vilna Gaon says, ayin tachas ayin. Tachas means literally what? Under. If you take a look at the word ayin in Hebrew, take a look at, let's say you have the Aleph Beis written like this. Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet Hey Vav, top to bottom. You have an ayin. What's the letter underneath an ayin if you go top to bottom? Ayin, what's the next letter? Pei. You have a yud, what's the next letter under yud? A chaf. And a nun, sofis, a nun, what's the next letter? A samach. The three letters underneath ayin in the Aleph Beis, the three letters underneath them are a chaf, a samach, and a pei, kesef. Right? So ayin, you knocked out somebody's eye, tachas ayin, you pay what's under the word ayin, which is kesef. That's what the Vilna Gaon says. Ayin, tachas ayin. I didn't notice that, the Vilna Gaon did. That's ayin, tachas ayin. Right? That's why nobody says the Kaplan Gaon. Right? The Vilna Gaon says ayin, tachas ayin. Okay? So that's what you pay kesef. Now, the question becomes, if that's true, and it is true, because that's how halacha works, why is it that it's written in this way? Why is it right ayin, tachas ayin? Why don't you just say kesef, tachas ayin? Excellent, excellent. In other words, don't think that when you knock out a guy's eye and you pay him, that you, what do you call it? That you then, okay, I paid you, we're good, we're even, right? It doesn't work that way. Ayin tachas ayin, what a person really deserves is that his own eye should be knocked out. Can't have a society functioning like that. And therefore the Torah says you make a financial compensation, but don't think we're even. Don't think that, okay, all's taken care of. Knocked out the guy's eye, knocked out the guy's tooth, and now we're, okay. That's really what should happen. But the Torah comes along and says, we can't have a society function like that, therefore we don't do that. Now, more than that, when you want to compensate a guy, let's say somebody caused somebody pain, nezek, tsar, ripush, how do you compensate somebody for tsar? Right? So there are two opinions in the Gemara. There are two opinions how you compensate for pain. One opinion is, how much would you pay? How much would you take to let me apply this pain to you? Right? I'll pay you $10 to let me hit your finger with a hammer. Would you take $10 for that?
No.
20?
At least 100.
At least 100. Okay, and everything's got its price.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jared, you're shaking your head. $500,000. Oh, all of a sudden we changed. Look how quickly we changed, right? It was one. We upped the bid by one, and suddenly we're willing to do this. So the Torah says we don't do that. The Torah says we don't do that. The way you compensate, what would you pay to not have it done to you? Not what would you accept to have it done. How much would you pay to not have it done to you? That's less. Now, we're not paying that kind of money. Forget it. Go ahead, take my hand. We're not. There's a limit. It's going to come out less. There's a limit. You want to pay me? I have a price. My fingers are worth something. I have a price. Well, let's talk. Wait, you want me to take my money? No, that's going to be less. That's always going to be less. All right. So that's how these compensations are calculated. Okay. Now, take a look further, and then it says, bottom of the page, pasuk chav ches. Hey, here we go. It's all one Torah. Somebody's ox tagged somebody, a man or a woman, he died. What do you do with the ox? Sokol yisokel hashor. The ox is stoned. Velo ye'achal es besoro. And you do not eat the flesh. Ubal hashor naki. Baal hashor naki means that the guy who, the Pashup shot is that once, take a look at Rashi, it's a left column, 3 lines on the bottom. Ki adam ha'omer l'chavero, 422, left column, 3 lines on the bottom. Bala shor naki ki adam ha'omer l'chavero, yatsa ploni naki min achosav. Ve'en lo behem hana shel klum. That means that he went out empty. He lost his property, he doesn't have any benefit. Zel midrasha. Upshuto kemashmo lefisha nemar mud v'gab balashor yuma sutzrach lomer batam ubalashor naki. Okay, so here the Chassam Sofer says an interesting point. If you look at the pasuk, it says they stoned the ox. Umeis sokol yisokel ashor. Then it says v'lo yeyachal es besaro. His flesh cannot be eaten. Well, isn't that obvious? In order to eat an ox, what do you got to do? You got to shecht it. And once you give it skila, so obviously you can't eat the flesh. Seems redundant, right? Okay, the plain meaning over here is that what do you call it? That you can't. Rashi says that even you shecht it after they paskin in Beis Din. Let's say they paskin, okay, he's got to be stoned. You go to court, they paskin, he's got to be stoned, and you quickly grab your ox and you shecht it. And then you can't, Rashi, that doesn't work. And not only that, you can't get any benefit from it. You can't even feed it to the dogs. And when the Torah says you can't get benefit from something, let's say you cook meat and milk. You cook meat and milk together, it's usher not only to eat it, it's usher bahana. You can't get any benefit. You can't sell it to a non-Jew. You can't feed it to your dog. You can't get any benefit. Here you can't get any benefit. Chassam Sofer says, what happens to a kosher animal normally? What normally happens to a kosher animal? He becomes the flesh of a Jew. Kosher animal, when you eat it, becomes part of your body. Becomes the flesh of a Jew. This animal lost the merit of becoming the flesh of a Jew. What you eat, you are what you eat. V'lo yeyachel es b'saro. There's a punishment. The animal that wasn't guarded, all right, the animal doesn't have free choice, obviously, but the Torah is emphasizing that this animal, sometimes you want to get Kabbalistic about it, it could be a tikkun for them. I remember hearing the chicken that's eaten on Shabbos at the Shabbos table, that elevates the neshama of the chicken. Have you ever heard that idea? It elevates the neshama of the chicken. That's why I'm all into elevation on Friday night. Hey, let me elevate that drumstick, will you? That looks like it needs a tikkun right over there. When I finished with it, it certainly didn't look like it was better off. But okay, whatever. That's okay. So kabbalistically, that's what could be. Just think of the chicken wings that we fixed up last Thursday night. Wow, what a tikkun. So over here, the animal, whatever that means, the animal doesn't get its tikkun. Okay. Now I want to get to one. There's one. There are one or two points I really want to get to. If you take a look at 424. V'chiyiftach ish bor. Hey, look at that. A bor. If you can't get enough of a good thing, right? Yeah, haven't had enough of it in Shir and Gemara. Let's get to it in Chumash a little bit too. So Pasuk Lamed Gimel says, "V'chiyiftach ishbor o ki yichre ishbor." Man opens up or digs a pit. V'lo yechasenu, he doesn't cover it over. V'nofal shama shor o chamor. An ox or a donkey falls. Ba'al bor yishalem kesef yoshev levolav amesi elo. So you got to compensate for damages. Shor v'lo odam, chamor v'lo kelim, and everything we learned in Gemara. Chassam Sofer says this is talking about somebody who opens up a spiritual pit. Somebody who creates a spiritual stumbling block for other people. That means you, through your behavior, we, through our behavior, somebody saw us set a negative example. And somebody says, well, if he could do it, I could do it too. I opened up a pit. I uncovered a pit. I didn't do tshuva. I didn't cover it over. I just kind of behave a certain way. And people see me and say, well, if he could do it, I could do it. V'nofal shama shor o chamor. An ox or a donkey represents two types of people who sin. There's a person who sins to simply provoke God, what we call a mumar lahachis. Mumar lahachis is somebody who sins just to make a point. Just to make a point. There's chicken on the table. One is shechted and one is not shechted chicken. One's kosher chicken, one's treif chicken. They taste the same. They're made the same way. The guy says, I don't eat kosher. What does it hurt you to eat the kosher? I don't eat kosher. He's making a point. That's worse than what's called a mumar l'te'avon. A mumar l'te'avon is somebody who generally is, I know I shouldn't be doing this, what can I do? I have a yetzer hara. That's nowhere near as severe as a mumar lahachis. In Israel, the breakdown is the secular Ashkenazis in Tel Aviv are generally rebelling against Torah. Your average secular Sephardi has all the respect for Torah. He just feels, listen, what do you want? I have a yetzer hara. So it's a broad difference in the degree of sin. I have a yetzer hara, what can I do? An ox represents those who sin simply for the sake of sinning. The same way when an ox gores, doesn't get any real pleasure out of it. The ox doesn't get pleasure out of it. A donkey represents those who sin because of pleasure. I enjoy it. Like a donkey, the word chamor is related to the word chomer, which is physicality. So the Torah says, a guy sets this precedent for other people. Then an ox or a donkey falls in. An ox or a donkey falls in. That means a sinner, whether he's a flagrant sinner or whether a sinner who's rebelling or he's a sinner because he's out of control. Bala bor yishalem. The owner of the pit pays. You carry responsibility for their averas. They're responsible too. They're responsible too. But you who set the precedent, you carry responsibility. Kesef yoshiv levolov. He must return money. That means you're going to have to pay HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'amesi elo. Eternal death. So a person has to know that we're responsible. We've spoken about this in the past, not only for what we do, we're responsible for any sort of example that we set for other people. And the flip side is true as well. Because not only true, even more so. Because if you influence somebody positively, then for sure you get even more dividends in his mitzvahs than you get held responsible for his averas. So we're playing for high stakes. Okay, now take a look at pasuk Per Chav Beis pasuk Yud Zayin. Chav Beis Yud Zayin. What page is it? 430. By the way, one of the most popular Rabbanim in Israel, there's somebody named Rabbi Yankele Galinsky. I think he was a contemporary of the Stiplers, and he used to go out. He was very, very funny, very, very funny. He used to give drushas, and he was very, very deep. He was very, very deep, very massive Talmid Chacham, but he was very, very funny and very, very sharp. So he was once by a doctor. And he had trouble hearing. So the secular doctor says to him, Rabbi, I want to ask you a question. What does the Talmud mean when it says, Tov shebarofim leGehenim, the best of doctors goes to Gehenim? So he goes, it doesn't matter. He goes, I want to know. Tell me. He says, it doesn't matter. He says, what do you mean it doesn't matter? He says, the Talmud's talking about the best of doctors. There's nothing to do with you. We're talking about Okay, 2 lines from the top. Says the Gemara, the Torah, Micha shefa lo sechaya, a witch must not live. This is the command in the Torah against witchcraft. Micha shefa lo sechaya. 430, second line from the top. Micha shefa lo sechaya, a witch must not live. Now there are 2 anomalies in the structure of this pasuk. First of all, it doesn't normally, the Torah says, somebody who does something must be put to death. Here it doesn't say put her to death, she must not live. And therefore we learn from here that, number, the commentaries say this tells us the degree of severity, number 1. Number 2, that if somebody can't bring the witch to Beis Din, you're actually allowed to kill the witch outside of Beis Din. I guess witches have the ability to avoid them. By the way, the Talmud, the Gemara is full of discussion about witchcraft. Full, go all over the place. There are discussions about witchcraft and how to avoid witchcraft, what makes you susceptible to spells, what makes you... The Gemara is full of witchcraft stories. Now, here there are 3 degrees. First of all, what is witchcraft? Let's get it clear. Now, the second anomaly, by the way, is you'll notice that it says it in the feminine form. It says Micha shefa, which is feminine. What's a male witch called? By the way, what's the correct word for a male witch? No, in English. I knew you'd say that. That's incorrect. You've been reading too much Harry Potter. No, that is incorrect. That is correct. A warlock, a sorcerer, and a wizard are subcategories of warlocks. A witch and a warlock. However, the Torah says it in the feminine form. Now, males are also not allowed to engage in witchcraft. Why does the Torah say it in the feminine form? Says Rashi that it includes males. Right column, 4 lines from the top. Micha shefa lo sechaya, says Rashi, elatu must be bezin, she must be executed. 4 lines from the top, right column. Ve'echad zecharim ve'echad nekevos. The echad over here means whether male or female, it's forbidden. Ela shediber hakosuv behove. The Torah talks in the most commonly found way. Shehanoshim mitzuyos mechashefos. That it's most common that women are found as witches. Their witchcraft is a much more popular pursuit among women than warlockery is among men. That is that, and you see that through history. You had the Salem witch trials. Who was on trial? It was a witch on trial. It was a female on trial. So they used keen Talmudic reasoning in the Salem witchcraft. They would strap the woman to a log. She was accused of being a witch. They would strap her to a log and they would dunk her in water for 10 minutes. If she died, nope, she was a witch. If she didn't die, only a witch could survive 10 minutes underwater, so they dunk her for 20. Right? They put her in a mikveh, and leave her in there. Okay. Now I have my own suspicions about it that probably some guy got a girl in trouble and he didn't want his wife to find out, so he accused her of being a witch. I'm assuming that's what happened. And in Christian Europe they had witch trials also. It was always a what do you call it? Where was it? Who was it? It was the women. Women were about witchcraft. Then you have a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says Marbin Noshim Marbik Shofim. A guy who the more wives you have, the more you're susceptible to witchcraft spells. And the commentaries explain that if a man has more than one wife, the women are competing for his affection. And they will go to witches and sorcerers in order to cast the spell on this guy that they teach you, what do you call it? And therefore, the Torah says witchcraft is severely forbidden. Now, what is witchcraft? Let's understand that. So that, the Gemara says, it's called kishuf. Kishuf is the, Mechashefa is the witch. Kishuf is the discipline itself of witchcraft. Because it's Makchishim Pamalya Shelmala, which roughly means you are interfering with the heavenly spheres. What that means is as follows. Imagine, you've heard the statement, the Gemara says, every blade of grass has an angel that tells it to grow. Did you ever hear that story, that statement? Every blade of grass has an angel that tells it to grow. I heard Rabbi Shraga Feivel Mendelowitz, who founded the Torah Vodas Yeshiva in America in the 20s or 30s, he was once giving his Talmidim a shear on the lawn. And one of the Talmidim was sitting there, and he absent-mindedly plucked the blade of grass. He just ripped the blade of grass out of the ground. So Shraga Feivel Mendelowitz said to him, there's an angel telling that blade of grass to grow, and you're telling that blade of grass not to grow. He's emphasizing the point. What are you just ripping up grass for? What are you doing that for? Think what you're doing. What that means is everything in the physical world has a spiritual counterpart. Anything that's in the physical world has something corresponding to it in the spiritual realm. Witchcraft is the ability to tap into the spiritual realm and by manipulating forces in the spiritual realm, bring about an effect in the physical world. That's the basic definition of witchcraft. And it's forbidden. And if a person performs witchcraft, it is a cousin of idol worship, and it is punishable by stoning. It is the most severe form of what I'll get to 1 second. By the way, did you ever hear they claim, sometimes people make claims which are silly. They claim Thanksgiving is called Thanksgiving because the early pilgrims used turkeys to celebrate, and turkey is called a Tarnagol Hodu, and therefore Hodu means thanks, and therefore they call it Thanksgiving, which is utter nonsense, right? So sometimes you hear these things which are absolutely, absolutely somebody was obviously on drug flashback when they said it. But somebody pointed out abracadabra. Abracadabra, right? We've all heard that. The word abracadabra, which is very closely related to the Hebrew of Abra, I will create, Kedabra as I speak. Abra, Kedabra, which is likely to have some sort of connection. The abracadabra probably came from Ivra, Kedabra, I will create as I speak, something related to witchcraft. So the Gemara talks about it. Now, the big question people ask is, well, if you have Jake, what were you going to ask before I said, what were you going to ask?
I was just going to, there are some crazy people nowadays who claim that they are witches, they have some sort of powers or whatever, So is that the type of witchcraft that the Torah is talking about, or is it talking about people who could actually like shoot fire out of their hands?
That's a good question. So there are three levels. There are first of all the commentaries. There is a discussion among the commentaries about whether or not witchcraft still exists today. Supernatural witchcraft, sleight of hand certainly exists, but whether supernatural witchcraft exists, there are commentaries that say that it exists. There are others that say that the discipline has been lost. I once asked Rabbi Tatz about witchcraft, and he said to me that he had seen, Rabbi Tatz obviously, he saw things in the bush in South Africa with these witch doctors, out in the bush, by these primitives out in the bush in South Africa. He said that his words were, "I have no explanation for them according to the physical world." Right? Now, that doesn't mean that they are. It could be this guy's super sophisticated. If somebody told me today they know for a fact that there is supernatural witchcraft, I'd say, okay, well, the Torah says there is. The Torah says there's such thing as witchcraft. Yeah. Either there is or there isn't. That wouldn't affect my lunch one way or another, right? What do you call it? But now, there are three levels. There is supernatural witchcraft, which is a capital offense. There is sleight of hand, where you deceive people. Using all sorts of trickery where you're deceiving people, which is an isser. It's not a capital offense, but it is usser, especially if you're using it to take people's money. Nowadays they have magicians who perform, and the poskim generally say that a magician who's performing for kids on Chol Hamoed, where they have these shows, so he should show them a trick or two in the beginning so that they're convinced that it's not a supernatural witchcraft, unless in case you thought that Herschel Goldstein had superpowers, with where he's still got some Schultz stains on his shirt, so just so you should know he doesn't have any supernatural powers. But that sort of thing is a prohibition. Supernatural witchcraft is a capital offense. And sleight of hand, where you're tricking people to take their money, that's an isser. That's a regular isser. Yeah, yes.
You go into Vilna, you use Kabbalah to formulate
to make a golem.
What's the category?
Sorry. So that I don't know. We don't know where the line is between what they call Kabbalah Ma'asit. People think of Kabbalah, ooh, somebody's going to get it. A table's going to elevate, somebody's going to turn invisible over here, ooh, Kabbalah. Kabbalah just means a tradition, and it doesn't mean that Kabbalists are walking around. Not every Kabbalist who's wearing a white hood could turn around and make you disappear. Right, and those who know, whatever they do, whatever the Vilna Gaon was able to do, whatever he did and whatever he'll do, whatever is true and whatever is legend, at the end of the day, it wasn't witchcraft. At the end of the day, it wasn't witchcraft. Witchcraft is a severe prohibition. So that's what the Torah is saying over here. And therefore, the big question that people ask, I'll have to deal with this tomorrow, is if I have the ability to tap into the heavenly spheres, isn't that a sign I should use it? Aren't I meant to use that ability? Right? That's what people ask all the time. I have the ability. Was it the ability? If God gave the ability, is the ability meant to be used? All right, that we'll speak about tomorrow.